50% why? Because let me tell you why. Sensor Tower is bugged. It's always been bugged, and I guarantee you Wuthering Waves made at least 10 mil. But that's not what the Hoyoverse cogs want you to know.
Revenue numbers are out on Sensor Tower, with many titles across the board like Love and Deep Space and Honkai Star Rail taking the top spots. We're seeing steady levels of growth from the prior month's numbers, with other titles like Zenless Zone Zero and Genshin Impact rising by a few million in global sales. Wuthering Waves, on the other hand, saw another drop in revenue heading into October. And
yeah, so I heard this number was fake. You know, I don't want to put my conspiracy theory hat on, but I heard this shit was fucking fake. But maybe this will address that in the video.
With the 50% drop overall and only $2 million recorded in revenue across CN, there are quite a few players who are starting to feel a bit of concern. When we consider the huge amount of hype heading into 1.3, the incredible publicity the version has received in regions like CN, and the incredible ratings for the game across app stores as a result of the update, many are confused by the revenue results. Especially considering that the first 2 days of Shorekeeper's banner were supposed to be registered in this data. However, one thing every person passing through this data should do is take it with a grain of salt. A big one, as there are numerous factors related to Wuthering Waves and not at play when it comes to these overall numbers. Today, we'll be diving into what these factors actually are, breaking down the conditions leading up to
So here's the factor. Sensor Tower is sometimes a piece of shit graphic and an indicator on what the numbers actually are. No, I actually have seen real graphs that say that Wuthering Waves made around 10.5 million. That being said, PGR is an indicator of anything. It's that these companies don't need as much money as they're telling you to run these games. Like the fact that DeWay went on stage and was crying when he had $36 million and delivered Natlan, which, by the way, one patch after Natlan, it's already a fucking dead patch and people don't like the fucking game. It's pretty damn insane when the curtain's pulled back and you realize, wait, these companies need way less money than we thought to run their fucking games. Yeah, the game's fine regardless of whether it makes 6 million, 4 million, 3 million, 10 million. They still have enough to run their game. And I'll be real, I'm just waiting for Wuthering Waves 2.0. The biggest thing they need to do is revamp the beginner experience and then hit the ground running for 2.0, and they're fine. And then release one character with a titty skin. Sure, and I know when I say that, y'all think that I'm joking. I know you're like, oh, he's capping. There goes Techless again. But for real, PGR has put out booby skins before, right? Wuthering Waves will get these. It's just a matter of time.
WoW's version 1.3, where you should have a bit of skepticism when it comes to Sensor Tower's numbers, and from there, what we can expect from Wuthering Waves as it moves forward. This game, for a lot of players, is a lot more enjoyable on the PC, and when a platform only accounts for data from mobile, it's not telling the whole story. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. When it comes to September revenue, players should recognize the road WoW traveled leading up to version 1.3.
I know a lot of people consider Wuthering Waves a mobile game, a Chinese mobile game, but I'm going to be real. I think Wuthering Waves is far more of a North American PC game. And the reason why I say that is because in China, they're not really a fan of more difficult content, whereas this kind of feels like the gacha game that us Westerners wanted from a company. And the PC performance and the controls and the reactability of every, what's the word? The response of every button click that you do on PC is so satisfying, as well as the gameplay loops where it's not like an infinite grind, right? Like you can go online in like 2 days and get a new whole echo set for any character very easily. So I know this was supposed to be a Chinese mobile game, but it kind of feels like it was marketed for North America.
With only the second update to the game, Kuro released what many considered a complete filler patch, with no meaningful story progression, limited appeal for one of their new releases, and what many consider to be one of the biggest factors in September's results, a 3-week banner for a character that was, quite literally, completely free. It's clear from the August numbers. Jeja was a character that didn't tick off a lot of boxes for players.
And the other thing is that people might be saying, oh, okay, well, what's his name? Zhang Liao, whatever the fuck his name is, Robot Boy. Robot's released, right? Okay, well, that would only prevent 3 weeks of revenue. But here's the other thing that you have to consider. Zhang Liao is so fucking broken. He's like one of the best characters in the entire game. And when players have access to an account that is already strong enough to clear the content, the FOMO of not getting a new character will be a lot less due to the fact that you can already beat everything. Because they didn't just release a character for free. They released the best unit in the game for free. And that's another huge factor people aren't taking into consideration.
Their conservative visual design and extremely limited team compositions meant that regardless of the reason, waifu or meta, the drive to pull on her banner, lose 50-50s, and spend if those 50-50s were lost wasn't quite there. Zhongli Yao, on the other hand, he was completely free. And when going to soft pity 2 times accounts for roughly
Jinzi better, but well, Jinzi might be better. However, Robot Boy does comparable damage, and he's also like way easier to play. Right? Jinzi, she's a little bit complex, guys. She is a little bit complex. Robot guy is literally just smash buttons, you kill them all.
140 pulls? That's an insane amount of potential pulls that Kuro gave to players for free. It didn't matter if you didn't want Zhongli Yao. If you did, you didn't have to spend at all. What this ultimately meant was that you didn't lose a lot if you didn't pull and
Guys, if you're saying GC's not complex, that's just because you're good at the game. To a casual player, she would come off as confusing 1,000,000%.
version 1.2. And even if you pulled on Jeja's banner to a single pity, or if you pulled Zhongli Yao's weapon, you weren't running out of pulls across the entire version unless you pulled on multiple banners. And there just wasn't a big reason to do that. What this meant was that players, heading into 1.3 and the incredible hype prepared for Shorekeeper, there were a massive number of people who were able to completely guarantee her without spending a single dime.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a phenomenon we've seen before. I like to call it the Kafka effect, a circumstance where an incredibly popular character with widespread adoration across the fanbase doesn't do well at all when it comes to revenue. And that's because people were saving multiple patches for her.
True.
And it's the same case for Shorekeeper. Wuwa was a game that launched with very few sustainers, and the need for multiple to clear the most rewarding endgame content meant that Shorekeeper, as the first limited one, was a top pick for many, and absolutely mandatory for others. When you need something, you save to make sure you can get it, and when you just want something, that's when you start spending. And a lot of players, they needed Shorekeeper. And with her incredibly early marketing, with drip starting all the way back to the first version update of the game, that meant that players have had a lot of time to save. Shorekeeper.
Yeah, I also don't think people remember 1.0's launch. People consider it one of the worst launches ever. I consider it one of the best. And let me tell you why. Because the game worked great for me. And so while everybody else is on fire, I'm sitting here getting free 5 stars. I'm sitting here getting hundreds of free pulls. I'm sitting here getting thousands of free asterite. Everybody else is crying. I'm like, hey man, yeah, Kuro, this game blows. I need 100 more pulls, right? And like, even still, I believe every character in the game besides Dion. I didn't pull on him. I would get him if there's a rerun banner. And I've gotten every weapon for every limited 5-star character that I have. And I think I've maybe spent $100 on the game, which is fucking insane. Like, that truly is fucking insane. Like, they gave us so much free shit, it's nuts. And I think the best thing that they could do if they really need to put the revenue up is just start releasing 2 characters every single patch like they do in every other fucking game. If we really need money. That's the great thing. Them hitting 6.7 million allegedly would be worrisome if they were actually doing all the proper monetization methods, but they're just not. They're being incredibly kind, incredibly considerate, a very like pro player right now. If they were to be releasing 2 characters every patch, if they were releasing cosmetics, and they're also like stifling rewards to players, and they're still not making money, okay, we're fucked. But they're really kind of just like, here's $1 million. How do we make money off this? I don't know yet. Wait a couple patches. Like, they're barely scratching the surface in how they could be making money. So I'm really not worried.
Herself came
really
with
not.
incredible value across her early sequence nodes, with a huge quality of life buff that gave her far more variety in team comps at S1, and of course, her insane 40% attack boost to the entire team at S2. But the fact of the matter is that not a lot of players actively pull for sequence nodes for sustainers. There's a much bigger appeal to investing in DPS characters for more active and noticeable upgrades versus the entirely passive bonuses you'd get from a sustainer. Honkai Star Monorail proved this to us, with characters like Luocha or Fu Xuan, equipped with very powerful initial upgrades on their dupes, performing the worst out of all the game's limited characters on their release. People don't like investing in sustainers. And even if you were a person who wanted Shorekeeper sequence nodes, the chances are you likely claimed them from the Coral shop, where for the exchange of 45 pulls, you could redeem one whole copy. When comparing 45 pulls to the potential 160 you'd go on the character banner, you can imagine how that would have a big impact on revenue. And when we're nearly 5 months into the launch of the game, it's undeniable that there are many players who had the resources to do this. What this ultimately meant is that Shorekeeper's revenue had a lot of factors working against it, with her S0 sales impacted by the massive amount of savings players cultivated across 1.2, and the revenue from her whale bait early sequence nodes countered by the absurdly easy access many had to her dupes, costing a fraction of what they typically would in many of the top titles. All of these factors are tied to Kuro Games, from their patch schedule all the way to the generosity in their design of the Coral store. And when you consider that her weapon wasn't a very big upgrade over a 4-star option, there wasn't
but that weapon looked cool now.
a lot of incentive to spend there
Silently got
either.
fucking
However,
free, bro.
there are other nuances at play, specifically when it comes to Sensor Tower itself. Sensor Tower only looks at mobile sales, and Wuthering Waves is a game, due to a poor initial mobile reception, fast-paced combat, and oftentimes difficult to handle camera controls, it doesn't have a huge mobile player base. With the release of controller support on all platforms, new in version 1.3, this is something we can expect to change, but it's still a large obstacle to get through. What this means is that there are a lot more players engaging with the game on PC, and one thing we've learned from
I think this is speculation, but I would agree, like, this is something that a lot of people think. And this is what I also thought for Genshin Impact, is that people must be playing this shit on PC. However, I would still say you would be shocked at how good Chinese players are at playing shit on the phone because they're used to it. Now, we as Westerners are not used to this shit at all, right? This is a good point, however, it still is speculation.
From the past few months is that PC gaming in CN is on the rise, specifically due to the release of Black Myth Wukong. That rise in PC gaming and Wuthering Waves' dramatically improved experience on that platform isn't accounted for at all in this revenue data. That's a huge part of the player base that's getting ignored, and there are some massive benefits to PC sales. That's because app stores, be it Apple or Google or third party, take a massive cut from any revenue generated on their platform. That percentage share is significantly lower when it comes to PC. Players make direct transactions with Kuro Games, and as a result, Kuro's slice of the pie is significantly higher. While we have absolutely no recorded data of PC revenue, when we factor in the rise of PC gaming in CN, the overwhelming support version 1.3 has seen on social media like Bilibili, and the massive increase in net revenue developers get from PC sales over the App Store,
I do enjoy knowing that people seeing this video will have a guttural reaction because there's so many people like Genshin Impact that want Wuthering Waves to fail. Now, let me explain to you why. If you want Wuthering Waves to fail and you want Genshin Impact to succeed, you are quite literally just wrong. Now, you might like Genshin and you might hate Wuthering Waves, and that's okay, right? But you have to understand that what Genshin represents is a monopoly, and what Wuthering Waves represents is a new company that is attempting to break into the space in order to make these games more accessible and less vulturistic to their players by showing how generous game companies can be, whereas other in a space full of greed and tight fistness. These companies want to give you 3 polls for 3 years as a reward to being their player, right? That is about $1.10. Whereas Kuro Games represents a company attempting to make it that has given us hundreds of polls for fucking nothing. Okay? Not to mention new systems like weapons being automatically guaranteed. Lowering it from 90 to hard pity to 80 to hard pity, right? Everything Kuro Games and Wuthering Waves represents for the space is very healthy for us as players. So you really should want this game to do well if you want the games in the future to be less greedy. So why do we want these games to make as much money as possible? Like, if you're still making millions a month and haven't hyper monetized your game, that's good for the consumers. No, that is great for the consumers. But the problem is that people think dollar earned equates to how good the game is. This is very popular in the culture over in the East. Like, whatever game is making the most money must be the best game. TLDR, why the revenue report was changed. I noticed that from the previous months, Reddit posts different than one on the why is that? Reddit posts get posted on the first of the month when prices are not stabilized yet. They usually stabilize by the end of the second week of the month. I cannot replace images on Reddit, but the website gets updated 4 to 5 times a month. Yeah, because I know Wuthering Waves was reported to make 6.7 million, but in the end, actually made around 10.1 million, from what I heard.
It wouldn't be surprising at all if Wuthering Waves is doing...
Sensor Tower updated, look at UWA. Yeah, WUA went from 6.7 to 11 million. Yeah, so people were freaking out over that shit, but yeah, that makes sense.
A lot better than
I'll be real. Even at 6.7 million, I was never worried about WUA, and I have a video proving that. But yeah, I wasn't worried about it at all.
The Sensor Tower data shows. And of course, we always have to consider the fact that Sensor Tower is just wrong. They have had numerous incidents where days, if not weeks of revenue are simply not recorded, and they have no real data aside from iOS sales. Numbers from the Android store or any other third-party platforms are guesstimated. You always have to take these reports with a massive grain of salt. At the end of the day, there were a lot of factors leading up to September's numbers. But one thing for certain is that Camellia, a long-anticipated release, is launching after Shorekeeper's drained us completely. Players had
Why you say it like that?
All of 1.2 to save. And now that those savings are gone, we should see some much bigger numbers in 1.4. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.
Nah, it's a good-ass video, man. I am so glad Saint Tontas is doing well. I think he's a great fucking content creator. I think he got a lot of shit for no fucking reason, bro. Like, people were on his ass over nothing, and nobody wanted to hear this dude out. So, yeah. I'm glad I at least gave him the benefit of the doubt. Yo, Saint Tontas, you're fucking killing it, bro. Keep it up.